Hey folks, welcome back to the Mill 52 workshop. My name is Bill, this is my shop, and let me tell you about my next project. I'm very excited to announce what I'm going to be working on next. It's a 3/4 inch scale, 3.5 inch gauge live steam locomotive, and this is the chassis for it. It's called the LBSC Tich. If you wanted to Google it, that would be the easiest thing. LBSC is a pseudonym for the author of numerous live steam articles and plans. His real name is Curly Lawrence. I think the LBSC stands for London Brighton South Coast, which was a railway in England, and he adopted that as his moniker. But this is what the finished version of the locomotive will look like. And I wanted to point this out. As you know, when I start a project, I always try to point out the resources that are available, and there's a ton, because this is an old kind of historic design. There's a ton of stuff on the web. You just kind of have to look for it a little bit. But my main point is, I bought these castings in this unfinished project in 2016, and the first thing I did was to communicate with the seller, and he sent me a bunch of emails about the history of it, and tips for building. And so I've saved all that stuff, and I'm really glad I did, because I don't know if I'd be able to retrieve those or not. But here's a picture of another photo of what the locomotive looks like. I've taken pictures off the internet and printed them out and saved them. This is a good one. This would be useful for me because I plan on using these slip eccentrics for the gearing versus the Welsh Arts gear. So that's a good close-up of what it should actually look like when I get done. The oil pump here, buffer beams, that kind of thing. This is the gentleman that I bought the set from, running his own as a young man in Delaware. And there's some other stuff, ton of stuff on the web. Gentleman had documented several years ago building a small boiler version of the Tich, and posted a lot of photographs. So I saved all that, printed it out. I know it's kind of like that. Reminds me of that TV commercial nowadays that you don't have to print the internet. Well, I agree with that. But if you're looking at a resource that you think, gosh, I may have a hard time finding this again, and you're planning a project, my suggestion is go ahead and print the thing out, start a binder about the project, and you can do a lot of planning work. Also, you might want to accumulate some resources, and let me show you a few of those. Here's a live steam book. This was also published by LBSC. This has a lot of neat stuff in it. This is an older paperback. A lot of things like making your own gauges and tips and techniques for the workshop. So real happy that I have this, and although none of it is exactly specific about the Tich, there's a ton of stuff in there that will relate to it and be useful in my project. The most useful thing I've got is this book. The title of the book is called Simple Locomotive Building. It's also by Curly Lawrence, LBSC, and it has all the plans, and as the people call this the words and music. So it's got plans and it's got descriptions about how to make stuff. So an outstanding resource. Glad I have this. Next thing, LBSC, a book. This is a compilation of his articles put together by the publisher of the magazine that he used to write for, and it's called LBSC's Shop, Shed, and Road. These things, you can still get copies of these on eBay and from some of the other model engineering publication publishers. Another thing, the 3/4 inch scale, 3.5 inch gauge Raritan, which is more of an American style locomotive. There's a book written by William Morwood here. There's a gentleman named Joe Tansky that sells this book and a set of castings to build one of these. It's probably kind of hard to see there, but a traditional style locomotive, and you can buy the whole set for a reasonable price. He runs specials from time to time, and what's great about this is because it's the same scale, it's got a lot of useful stuff in it, one of which is a diagram about how to use a propane tank inside a caboose, and he has plans for a propane burner in here too, which I may use because the gentleman that sold me this incomplete project and set of castings suggested that finding an alternate fuel, that apparently these locomotives, the Tich, runs best on some sort of green petroleum coke coal, which is hard to get or impossible to get in the States these days. So that's why I may use something like oil-fired or propane-fired. A couple of other resources here. There's another book that's published in the U.S. A Japanese gentleman has designed several 3.5-inch gauge locomotives, and they're very cool projects and all sort of lifetime achievement projects. This is the A3 switcher, and you can get castings for these books. Whether you build this exact design or not, they're just chock full of great illustrations and helpful tips and techniques. The reason I pulled this one out, it shows a quartering gauge here that you use to set the drive pins of the drive wheels, locomotive wheels, 90 degrees from each other. It's a real simple gauge that will be easy to make, and for what I need to do, I need to make something like this. So I'm glad I've got this resource. Really happy about that. So folks, if you would stay, so I'm going to order some things. I realize that there's a few parts I don't have, so there are several suppliers in England that you can still get parts and pieces for these locomotives. So I'm going to make an order for some eccentric straps and some other odds and ends that didn't come with the set of castings. And in the meanwhile, while I wait for those to arrive, one thing I'm going to do is, you can notice these buffer beams are aluminum, and what the gentleman that sold me this set had made the comment that anything you can do to increase the weight of the chassis will make it a better runner. So while I'm waiting for the package to get here from England, my idea is to take some steel angle iron. This is 1-inch angle iron, but I can mill it down to 3/4 of an inch. I've got a couple of pieces that will be very handy for that, and I can make replacements for the buffer beams here. That'll be a simple and fun project to work on for a couple weeks while those get here. Then when those get here, then I can start working on the axle and the eccentrics. This is the rear axle here. You'll see, if you stay tuned, you'll see the video of me taking this apart for the first time ever and talking more about what I need to do to this thing. But my buddy Fred came up with a great idea. These wheels are pressed on, and I really didn't want to mess with them, but his idea is I could press one of them off, just open up the hole just a teeny bit so I can use Loctite to re-secure it, and then if I have that quartering gauge, then I can use that gauge to Loctite it on when I go to, after I've loaded on, remove these things, loaded on all the eccentrics and everything that I need for the slip eccentrics to drive the valve train, and then have the axle loaded on, then Loctite the rear wheel on, and then I can set everything back in place like it needs to be. So that's why I wanted to have the drawing for the quartering jig. Alright folks, if you'll stay tuned for the next couple of segments, probably 5-6 minutes or so, you'll see me taking out that rear axle, and you'll see a little video of the overview of all the parts that came with this set, including the boiler. This will be a large boiler, which is 3 inches in diameter. So it's going to be a cool project. It'll probably take me a year to make this thing at least, but it should be interesting, and I'll try to keep you posted with weekly updates with what I've done each week, and hopefully it's interesting to you. Thanks again to the new subscribers. Welcome aboard if you're just joining us. Ask questions if you like. I'm just a hobbyist, so I'll do my best to answer. If you don't have anything to say, but you appreciate the comment and would like to let me know, please just give me a thumbs up. Please do subscribe. Please pass the word to folks and help me grow the channel. Thanks everybody. I appreciate you. Have a great week. Bye. Hey folks, for my next project, I'm going to be working on hopefully building this 3.5-inch gauge live steam locomotive. It's called the LBSC. That's the name of the pseudonym of the designer, Tich, T-I-C-H. And you can get a book. Here's a book. I'll do a segment on the different resources, but this is kind of what the finished product looks like, and this is what the actual materials look like. So the 3.5-inch gauge part, in case you're wondering or new to live steam, that's the gauge is the width of the track. So as you can see, the 3.5-inch, that's the spacing from the rims of the drive wheels. This is a relatively simple locomotive, especially compared to my Allen Mogul. It's a four-wheel 040 locomotive, but it'll still be a heck of a lot of work and a lot tinier than the big one. Be a lot more fun to pick up and move around. Here is the boiler. I've done a couple of videos on this locomotive and on these parts, and I'll do a playlist. I'll talk about that later, but I've gone through all the parts and pieces in prior videos. It's been several years, but one thing I wanted to do is point out the couple of gear choices. So this thing apparently is set up for what they call Walsharts, if I'm saying that correctly, gearing, and by that I mean it does not have any eccentrics on this axle other than the one that drives the pump here. So my intention is to build this with the very simple, what they call slip eccentrics or loose eccentrics for the gearing. So I'm going to have to take it apart. I'll document that as the first phase of this video, and I'll talk more about that as we go along. But I just wanted to shoot a piece overall. This is the boiler, just to give you an example of the size. Here's a TV remote, so you can see how small these pieces are by comparison, and how easily portable this will be when it's finished. Those are all the parts and pieces that I got from a gentleman named Bill Shields. I'm very grateful to him for selling me these things at a reasonable price, and I'm very much looking forward to building this thing. Okay, the first step in the process of figuring out if I can convert this, use it, make the slip eccentrics versus the Walsharts, is to take apart, to remove the rear axle from the chassis here. So I thought I'd shoot a video of it. I've got my tools laid out. The only thing I did so far is loosen these nuts by hand. So I've got some hex head. These are really pretty little brass hex head fasteners. I'm going to carefully put these in a place where I can retrieve them, and I know which is which, as they say. Little retainers, frame bolsters. This is all really cool. This is riveted on here, it looks like, so they were pretty faithful to the British design. Now this is the eccentric for the axle pump. I'll take that apart. A set of hex head keys. Just tiny little pieces. Looks like pretty nice craftsmanship. Alright, so I'm going to keep that together. This is the smallest of the metric wrenches I have. I really do like these, I don't know how you say it, but Bondhus brand. They've got the little, show you, the little round tip on there so you can get into different angles. So we'll put this here, and I'll orient it in the direction it was taken off, and then I can just slide this part forward, and not sure if that'll clear the axle or not, but now let's see if we can just lift the axle up and out. Oh yes, excellent. So there we have it. There's the axle. The wheels are pressed on, the drivers are pressed on. I'm going to make a mark. Let's see. This would be the engineer's side. I'll put an E on this side too, just so I don't get crossed up. But you see the axles, the drive pins are quartered. It looks like they're properly quartered, and the part of the challenge with taking this apart is messing up the quartering of the axles. And when I say quarter, they're 90 degrees, the drive pins are 90 degrees apart from each other. But to do what I think I need to do, I need to at least, Fred came up with this good idea of just pressing one of the wheels off, and then I should be able to slide off the axle boxes here and unscrew the eccentric here, and then I can slide on the eccentric and the slip eccentric and the drive on this side, put this on, put the other slip eccentric on this side here, and then an idea that would be practical is to either machine down the end of the axle slightly or just ream out the axle hole a little bit so that there's a little clearance. Instead of a press fit, it could be Loctited back on in place. I think that's a genius idea, because if it's Loctited like that, then that gives me the opportunity to create a jig, build a quartering jig for this. I do plan on building other 3.5-inch gauge locomotives, so it would be really handy to have a quartering jig for that purpose. So I think this is a good start for tonight. I'm going to take some still pictures and send them to Fred, and we'll see how it goes.